The kitchen fell into a heavy silence, thick with unspoken tension. Grant stood frozen, his hand clenched tightly around a dinner plate. His jaw twitched. A heartbeat later, fury erupted from behind his eyes, pure, unfiltered rage, and he launched the plate with violent force. The porcelain exploded against the wall, scattering fragments like angry confetti across the tile floor. "Are you serious, Liam?" he bellowed, his voice cracking under the weight of frustration. It wasn't just anger. It was humiliation, building from something deeper. Liam flinched, his eyes wide, as if he'd been struck. His hands trembled, barely able to hold on to the serving tray. The dining room outside, once buzzing with warmth and conversation, had grown still. Patrons glanced nervously toward the kitchen door. A woman near the window scoffed, her voice slicing through the quiet. "I used to love this place," she muttered with pointed disgust as she threw on her coat. "Now it's just a mess." She walked out, and her departure echoed louder than the shattering plate. From the corner of the room, Jackson watched it all. He sat alone, unnoticed in his usual booth, the one with a clear view of the kitchen. A faded baseball cap shadowed his thoughtful eyes, and his worn jeans blended him into the background. He seemed like any other regular, quiet, solitary, invisible. But Jackson noticed everything. His fingers wrapped tightly around a sweating glass of water, the muscles in his jaw tightening. The waitress approached. He ordered something simple, his voice calm, steady. But inside, a storm was forming. His gaze traveled from table to table, reading the tension like chapters in a book. Customers exchanged wary glances and leaned in to whisper. Liam stumbled through the dining area, his posture tense, his movements clumsy. His face held the look of someone who'd just been publicly undressed, confused, ashamed, trying to hold it together. A flicker of something sharp flashed through Jackson's eyes. Not anger, not quite. It was deeper, something like sorrow wrapped in disappointment. And then he looked at Grant. Grant was pacing near the kitchen doorway like a caged animal. His fists were clenched, shoulders rigid, fury still boiling just beneath the surface. Jackson's chest rose and fell slowly as he leaned back in his chair. Every detail told a story. The bitter silence, the hushed whispers, the awkward shuffling of feet, all signs of something broken. This wasn't just a bad night. It was a symptom of something worse. As his fingers traced the edge of the tabletop, old memories stirred like dust in sunlight. 2 decades ago, Jackson had stood in a kitchen not unlike this one, steam rising from dishwater as he scrubbed plates late into the night. No title, no salary. Just grit and a dream. Over the years, that dream had become reality. One humble diner had grown into the Rusty Fork, a thriving 12-location chain across the Midwest. He remembered the day he signed the documents, officially becoming CEO. His chest swelled with pride. But as the business grew, so did the distance between him and the people who ran it. Somewhere along the way, the soul of his restaurant had been buried under expansion plans and spreadsheets. Now, here he was, a stranger in his own creation. Jackson exhaled, slow and heavy. He glanced toward Liam, still shaken, still trying, then to Grant, still angry, still unaware of the damage he'd caused. Tonight, Jackson realized, was a reckoning, a chance to reclaim what he'd lost. Around him, the tension hadn't eased. It had only thickened. 2 guests leaned in close. One, a man in his 50s, shook his head with a tired sigh. "This place used to feel like home," he said, disappointment coloring every syllable. His companion nodded. "Something's different, off." At another table, an elderly woman whispered to her husband, "It's been almost 40 minutes. This isn't acceptable." Each word stung. Jackson felt their frustration like a weight on his chest. Not because they were wrong, but because he knew they were right. Liam rushed past him again, eyes downcast. Jackson's fingers tapped against his glass. So much was riding on tonight, more than profits or Yelp reviews. This was about respect, dignity, the beating heart of his legacy. Near the door, Clara, one of the last employees Jackson still remembered from the early days, hurried after the departing customer. Her voice was soft but urgent, her face etched with genuine remorse. "I'm so sorry for your experience," she pleaded. "Please give us another chance." But the woman kept walking, disappointment trailing behind her like smoke. Clara watched the door close with a bitter tightness in her face, then turned and strode back toward the kitchen, her expression darkening. She found Grant at the entrance, arms crossed in defensiveness. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You can't keep doing this," she said, firm but low. "You're tearing this place apart." Grant didn't answer at first. His eyes flickered with something dangerous, pride, maybe, or fear. He stared her down, unwilling to surrender to the truth in her voice. Jackson watched closely. He saw Clara's concern, the deep, almost maternal frustration of someone who still cared. And he saw Grant's resistance, a man cornered by his own ego. At the far end of the bar, two young employees whispered in hushed tones, thinking no one could hear. "You heard about yesterday?" one murmured. He yelled at someone again, bad this time. Jackson's ears caught it all. His pulse ticked faster. "They said someone's thinking about going public," the other replied. "Social media's gonna tear this place apart." A chill ran down Jackson's spine. He didn't just hear it, he felt it. The stakes were higher than he thought. This wasn't just about one man's outburst. It was about a culture festering in the shadows, one that could destroy everything he'd built. And now, there was no turning back. Jackson quietly slid his hand into his jacket pocket, the weight of the night settling heavier on his shoulders. He knew he couldn't just sit back anymore, not after what he'd seen. With practiced calm, he pulled out his phone, tapped open the voice memo app, and placed the device face down on the table. The screen dimmed, but the microphone stayed hot, capturing every word that slipped through the fractured air. Across the room, Grant's voice still lingered in the atmosphere, sharp, impatient, cutting. It hadn't softened since the broken plate. Jackson's posture remained still, but his senses were fully alert. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was a man collecting evidence, chasing a truth hidden in plain sight. Without lifting his gaze, Jackson opened a message thread and typed quickly, "Recording live." Staff clearly on edge. Multiple verbal incidents. Grant unstable, watching closely. His eyes followed Liam, who was now visibly struggling to maintain his balance near the bar, nearly dropping a tray. Jackson typed again, "Keep this between us. I need the full picture before I move." He hit send, locked his phone, and tucked it away, folding his hands over it like sealing a decision. Liam approached another table, clutching a tray with both hands, like it was the last thing keeping him grounded. His fingers trembled, his shoulders hunched in shame. Each motion was careful, too careful, his fear of another mistake obvious. He laid the plates down gently, but his shallow breaths gave him away. The guests at the table watched him with a mix of sympathy and thinning patience. Jackson's heart ached. He knew that feeling. The suffocating pressure of performing in the aftermath of failure, when every glance feels like judgment. For a fleeting second, Liam's eyes met his. Jackson gave him a barely noticeable nod, a quiet gesture of solidarity. Liam straightened a little, the tremor in his shoulders softening before he turned away. A small comfort in a storm. In that stillness, Jackson made a silent vow. Tonight would not end in silence. He would not allow this rot to remain hidden any longer. Liam stepped toward another table, this time with a pitcher of water. His hands were still shaking, but he pushed forward. As he leaned to pour, his wrist slipped. The water spilled, soaking the pristine tablecloth and splashing onto a customer's lap. The guest gasped and jolted up, surprised and visibly upset. Before anyone could react, Grant stormed over like a shadow with teeth. His voice exploded. "What is wrong with you, Liam?" he barked, eyes wild with fury. Can't you handle a single basic task? Liam froze, his face drained of color. He stared down, his cheeks burning red. The dining room fell silent again, the unease spreading like a fever. Everyone was watching, but no one moved. Jackson's stomach twisted. It wasn't just humiliation. It was cruelty, unfiltered, unchecked. He clenched the edge of his table, jaw tight, chest heavy. This was more than a bad night. It was a crisis spiraling fast. Clara rushed in, her expression strained but determined. She placed a firm hand on Grant's shoulder. "Grant, please," she said in a controlled tone. "Let's handle this quietly." But Grant recoiled from her touch. His voice rose again, even louder. "Quietly? He's making us look incompetent." His anger was no longer contained. It was public, unapologetic, and laced with venom. Clara glanced at the surrounding tables. "Grant," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Everyone is watching." Grant didn't care. "Good," he snapped. "Maybe they should see just how bad things have gotten around here." Murmurs rose like static. Customers exchanged looks. Some disapproving, others uncomfortable. Jackson sat frozen, watching the fallout unfold like a slow-motion collapse. Whatever trust the guests once had was fading fast. And it was clear. This wasn't an isolated outburst. It was the symptom of something festering underneath. In the kitchen, Liam stood near the sink, alone and shaking. He buried his face in his hands. His body trembled, his eyes glassy with tears he didn't want anyone to see. But Jackson saw. Ethan, another young employee, approached slowly, holding out a clean towel. "Hey," he said softly, "don't let him get to you. We all have nights like this." Liam looked up, blinking quickly to hide the emotion. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he whispered. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder. "You'll get through it." I promise. Jackson, watching from the dining room, caught a glimpse of the quiet exchange through the swinging kitchen door. His heart ached. These weren't just workers. They were people caught in the crossfire of a toxic environment. Needing a moment alone, Jackson stood and walked slowly toward the restroom. Inside the dim space, he splashed cold water on his face. As he leaned over the sink, his eyes caught something taped sloppily to the mirror. 3 sheets of paper, all handwritten. He leaned closer. They were resignation letters, simple, direct, and filled with frustration. Each name struck a chord. Jackson ran his fingers over the ink, reading between the lines. These weren't just departures. They were cries for help. Proof that the foundation was cracking. He took a deep breath and snapped a photo, then sent another message. "Miles, look at this. 3 ready to walk. We're losing good people. Fast." A few seconds later, "Understood. You want backup?" Jackson stared at the screen before replying. "Not yet. I need to see more." This wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about restoring what had been lost: dignity, trust, care. Back in the kitchen, the pressure boiled hotter. Grant hovered near the line, watching every movement like a hawk. A fresh ticket printed. Table 5 was late. Ethan stepped forward with a tray, ready to deliver, but Grant stopped him with a growl. "Why is this still sitting here?" he snapped, pointing to an unfinished plate. "You're supposed to be on top of this." "I was just waiting on the garnish," Ethan explained, startled. Grant cut him off. "Don't make excuses. You're not paid to wait, you're paid to move." Ethan stiffened but said nothing. He picked up the tray and walked off, silent, his pride stung. From his table, Jackson watched it all. And in that moment, he knew with certainty, this wasn't just a rough shift. This was systemic failure, and if he didn't act soon, it would unravel everything he'd ever built. Ethan stepped out into the dining room, tray balanced firmly in his hands, though his posture betrayed the stress he carried. His steps were deliberate, his movements slower than usual, as if his muscles had to resist the weight of something far heavier than dinner plates. Jackson's eyes followed him, narrowing slightly, not in suspicion, but in careful, quiet observation. Ethan placed the dishes in front of the guests with meticulous care, offering a strained smile that barely concealed the exhaustion lining his face. The guests nodded politely, but Ethan didn't wait for thanks. He turned swiftly, walking past Jackson's table. For a moment, Jackson caught a glimpse of Ethan's right hand, curled tightly into a fist, the knuckles bone white. Ethan paused at the service station, head bowed, chest heaving subtly. He blinked hard, trying to hold back tears threatening to surface. Then, without a word, he straightened his spine, wiped his hands on his apron, and returned to work like a soldier rejoining the front line. Jackson watched him go, and a heaviness settled over him. It wasn't just about one person breaking down. It was an entire team barely holding it together. In the kitchen, Clara pulled Grant aside, her voice calm but laced with urgency. "We need to talk," she said firmly, positioning herself between him and the line. "You've got to calm down." Grant brushed sweat from his brow and avoided her eyes. "We're buried right now, Clara. I don't have time for a lecture." "You're not helping," she replied, steady but low. "The team's on edge. The guests are noticing. You're pushing too hard." Grant scoffed. "They need to toughen up. This isn't some daycare, it's a kitchen." Clara's voice softened, but her words carried weight. "They're not the problem, Grant. The way we're treating them is." That hit something deep in him. He looked away, jaw locked. "You're better than this," she added gently. "Don't forget who built this place with you." For a few moments, silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken memories and old scars. Outside the kitchen, Jackson sat still, catching each word from the distance, reading every pause and shift in tone. Grant leaned against the prep counter, folding his arms. His voice dropped to a low grumble. "You think I enjoy yelling, Clara? We're understaffed, overbooked, and I'm holding this place together with duct tape and caffeine." Clara didn't interrupt. She let him release the frustration. "Every week it's someone new. No training, no loyalty. I spend more time fixing their mistakes than cooking." He glanced toward the dining room, bitterness in his voice. "They don't know timing. They don't understand pressure. And when the food's late, it's me who gets chewed out." Clara's response was quiet, deliberate. "Then train them. Don't crush them." Grant said nothing. He stared at the floor, his shoulders taut. Jackson kept listening, not just hearing words but recognizing something deeper. Grant's anger, he now realized, wasn't just frustration. It was fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being blamed, fear of failing. Back out in the front, a couple stood near the host stand, voices raised just enough for Jackson to hear. The woman's tone was polite, but edged with disappointment. "We've been coming here for years," she said. "Tonight, it feels different." "Cold," the husband added. "Rushed. Your team looks scared." Clara approached, nodding respectfully, masking the storm brewing beneath her professional demeanor. "I understand, and I'm truly sorry. We're doing everything we can to improve things." The woman offered a thin smile, filled with quiet sadness. "I hope so. This used to be our favorite place." Jackson didn't look away. Those words struck hard. The customers felt it too. They weren't just eating food. They were absorbing the energy, the tension, the fear in the air. And that meant the problem ran deeper than the kitchen. It infected everything. As Jackson shifted slightly in his chair, he didn't notice the small black dome camera above him, blinking silently in the ceiling. For a brief moment, it captured his face clearly, no longer hidden beneath a cap and casual attire. The reflection of overhead light traced his jawline, exposing him. Miles sat across town at Rusty Fork headquarters, surrounded by darkened monitors in the late-night control room. He flipped through live feeds, scanning for anything unusual, when he froze. Camera 3, table 11. There he was. Jackson. No doubt about it. Miles immediately grabbed his phone. "You're live on feed. Everything okay?" He waited, watching Jackson on the screen, scribbling furiously into a napkin. He typed again. "Back up. No response. Miles didn't press. He knew Jackson's rhythm. When he didn't reply, it meant he was getting close to something big. In the dining room, Jackson glanced at the message on his screen. "You're live on feed. Everything okay? Back up?" He paused, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then he replied, simply, "Not yet. Keep watching. Say nothing." He laid the phone back on the table and looked up, scanning the restaurant floor. Liam, quietly navigating the space. Ethan, holding it together by a thread. Clara, still pushing to keep the floor steady. Jackson's face was composed, but inside, he was a churn of conviction. He didn't need backup. He needed answers. Near the back exit, Liam slipped outside for a moment. The cool night air hit his flushed face. He leaned against the wall and pulled out his phone. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, forcing cheer into his voice. "Yeah, I'm okay." He listened to her voice on the other end, letting it ground him. Then came the confession, the break in his armor. "I think I'm going to quit," he whispered. "I'm trying, but I keep screwing up. I don't think I'm cut out for this." Another pause. No, it's not like that," he added quickly. "I'll figure something out. I didn't want to stress you out, that's all. I'll be home late. Try to sleep, okay?" He hung up and leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. Behind him, unnoticed, Jackson stood just out of view, listening. The words hit him like a memory. "I don't think I'm cut out for this." Jackson's arms crossed slowly, jaw set. He had been that young once, tired, invisible, trying to prove himself in rooms that never saw him. The pain Liam carried couldn't be measured in schedules or numbers. It lived in the silences between shifts. Back inside, Clara found Liam near the drink station. He was quiet, slow, but still moving. "Liam, can I talk to you for a second?" she asked gently. He looked up, eyes dulled but listening. "I know tonight's been hard, and I know Grant can be a lot," she said, her voice steady. "But I see how much you care. That matters." Liam hesitated. "I just don't think I'm good enough." "You're new," she said. "Mistakes happen, but you're trying, and growth takes time. I'm working to fix things around here. You're not alone." Liam gave a slow nod, something in his shoulders loosening. "If you can hang on just a little longer," Clara said, "I promise it'll get better." From across the room, Jackson watched. A flicker of hope lit in his eyes. Not big, not dramatic, but real. He'd seen enough. Liam's exhaustion, Ethan's resilience, Clara's quiet leadership, and Grant's unraveling. The evidence was in every face, every crack in the wall. Jackson pulled out his phone and typed, "Prepare a team meeting here tomorrow morning, no delays." He stared at the message before sending it. This couldn't be about policies or profits anymore. It had to be about people. He slid the phone back into his pocket and took one last look around. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The restaurant doors creaked open, and Grant walked in, face tired, bracing for another day. But something was off. The staff were gathered silently in the center of the dining room, all eyes trained on one man standing calmly in their midst. Jackson. No cap, no disguise, just presence, authority, purpose. Grant stopped cold. His eyes widened, flicking from face to face until they landed on Jackson's. "Jack," he breathed, barely audible. Jackson offered a quiet nod. "Good morning, Grant." Silence hung for a heartbeat too long. Grant's spine straightened, his expression hardened. He wasn't ready for this. But Jackson was. And so were the people who mattered most. Jackson had seen enough. The night before had revealed everything, not just cracks in the system, but the pain in people's eyes, the quiet exhaustion, the desperate attempts to hold things together with duct tape and sheer will. But this morning, he wasn't here to watch anymore. He was here to lead. The dining room was hushed. Staff stood in a loose semicircle, uncertain, their eyes darting between one another and the man at the center, Jackson. No longer the quiet observer in the corner booth. No more cap, no casual cover. Today, he stood crisp, direct, unmistakable. Not as a stranger, but as their CEO. Liam looked stunned, his mouth slightly ajar. Ethan dropped his gaze, caught between anxiety and hope. Clara stood calm but tense, arms folded, watching carefully. Even Grant stood frozen by the entrance, shoulders squared but eyes flickering with unease. Jackson looked at each of them, really looked, without notes, without fanfare. Then he spoke. "I spent the last 24 hours as your guest," he said evenly, his voice carrying. "Now, I want to speak to you as your leader." The air shifted. No one moved. No one breathed too loud. The question was in every silent glance. Why now? Then, Jackson pulled a small remote from his pocket. The flat-screen TV near the bar came to life. The sound clicked on. Grainy security footage filled the screen. The kitchen. The night before. Grant's voice rang out across the room, bitter and unmistakable. "Can't you handle one simple task? You're not paid to wait. You're paid to move." Ethan flinched. Liam recoiled. Clara stepped in. Everyone watched. The footage wasn't exaggerated. It was raw, real, undeniable. Grant's jaw clenched. Liam stared at the floor. Ethan remained unreadable. Jackson let the video run a few seconds longer, then paused it. "I didn't come here to shame anyone," he said firmly. "But I did come here to tell the truth." The silence after his words was heavier than the video. The screen faded to black, but the echo of those moments lingered in the stillness. He turned slowly toward Grant. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. "How do you explain this?" Jackson asked. The question hit like a drop of water in a still pond. Every eye turned to Grant. He swallowed. "I was under pressure," he said, voice low. "Too much to do, too little support." Jackson gave a slow nod. "But yelling at your staff? Humiliating them in front of customers? That's not pressure, that's a breakdown. And it breaks others when we carry it that way." Grant didn't respond immediately. He looked around, seeing not strangers but the people he'd worked beside. Ethan, Liam, Clara. Their faces didn't hold judgment, only weight, only truth. "I gave everything to this place," he said at last, his voice tighter now. "During the shutdown, when no one else stayed, I stayed. I cooked doubles, ran the line, ordered supplies. I kept it alive." Some of the staff nodded, remembering. Grant's pride was real, but so was his pain. "I didn't do it for recognition," he added. "I did it because I believed in this team. But lately, everything's changed. We're overwhelmed. New hires, no time to train, no one ready." Jackson listened silently. Grant wasn't lying, but his truth had turned into armor, into isolation. "You did carry this kitchen through hell," Jackson acknowledged, his tone soft but unwavering. "But somewhere along the way, that burden became resentment, and resentment isn't leadership." Grant stayed quiet. His arms hung at his sides. "Leadership," Jackson continued, "is about more than output. It's about how people feel walking away from you. Are they stronger? Do they believe in themselves more? Or do they leave feeling smaller?" Grant's eyes dropped. The anger in his body slowly melted into something closer to grief. "I didn't mean to become this angry," he said quietly. I've been doing everything alone." He looked around at the team, vulnerable for the first time. "When someone quits, I cover. When someone's sick, I stay. I've been drowning, Jackson, and I didn't know how to ask for help." Jackson exhaled. That was the moment. Not just accountability, but honesty. "I'm not here to fire Grant," he said clearly. A ripple of surprise moved through the staff. Even Grant looked up, confused. "He's made mistakes, but he also stayed when it mattered most. That deserves recognition," Jackson continued. "But showing up isn't enough anymore. We have to grow." He handed Grant a folded sheet of paper. "There's a slot open Monday. A leadership course, focused on empathy. I want you there. Grant took the paper slowly. This isn't a punishment, Jackson said. It's a reset, for you and for this kitchen. Grant nodded, emotion building behind his eyes. For once, he said nothing. He just breathed. Jackson turned slightly toward Clara. She's been holding this place together, he said. Supporting people, filling gaps without asking for credit. Clara blinked, taken aback. Starting today, Jackson continued, Clara's your new branch manager. Gasps, a few claps, genuine quiet recognition. Clara stared at him, stunned. Sir, You've already been doing the job, Jackson said. Now it's time you wear the title. Clara nodded slowly. I won't let you down. I know you won't. The atmosphere shifted. Shoulders loosened. Air flowed easier. Liam stood taller. Ethan exhaled. The first peace in weeks passed silently between them. Grant looked at the training slip again. He said nothing, but his posture changed. For the first time, his stillness didn't feel defensive. It felt humble. Clara stepped beside him. Not above him, but beside him. This was how it began again. Not polished, but real. 1 week later, the kitchen hummed, not with noise, but rhythm. The air was calmer. Grant returned wearing his usual coat, but not his usual edge. At the prep station, Liam slipped slightly with a knife. Grant stepped beside him. Here, he said gently. Let the blade do the work. He showed Liam carefully. No yelling, no tension, just teaching. Liam nodded. Grant nodded back. Across the kitchen, Clara allowed herself a small smile. The restaurant didn't feel perfect, but it felt possible. Liam moved through the dining room, steady and composed. At one table, he placed plates with ease. Is everything to your liking? He asked, voice confident but warm. Perfect, the guest said, smiling. From the kitchen, Grant looked up and gave a nod. Liam returned it with quiet gratitude. At a booth in the corner, Jackson sat, unnoticed by most. But Liam saw him. Their eyes met. Liam didn't speak. He didn't have to. That smile he gave now, it was real. Clara stood near the expo line, giving clear, calm direction. Refire on table 12. Let's do it fast but clean. Got it, Grant replied. No tension, just flow. Servers moved with ease. Laughter returned to the room in soft, familiar waves. Clara checked in with Ethan at the bar, then back to the kitchen, leading, not hovering. Jackson sipped his coffee and watched it all. The pulse had changed. Not fixed, but alive. A week later, Jackson returned again. No suit, no title, just another customer. He sat in the same corner, the same seat where he'd first watched it all fall apart. But today, it felt different. The air was light, the service smooth. Good evening, sir, Liam said, approaching with confidence. Welcome back. Jackson nodded. It's good to be back. He watched the harmony, the movement, the teamwork, the care. No grand speeches, just quiet pride. At the counter, the woman who once walked out in disappointment returned. This time, she smiled. I can feel the difference, she said. Whatever changed, it matters. That night, her review appeared online. The soul of this place came back, and maybe that's all a restaurant ever needs. Jackson read the words at his table, phone in hand. Around him, the restaurant pulsed with life. Not perfect, but honest. He whispered quietly to himself. Sometimes the greatest success is simply keeping one heart willing to listen. Have you seen yourself in this story? Are you Grant, Liam, Clara, or maybe Jackson? Let us know below. We're listening. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more.